I remember the exact moment everything began to fracture, and it wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no tears, no slamming doors. It was a glance. Just a simple glance. A look that held no warmth, no recognition. Like I was a stranger standing in her kitchen, drinking from her cups, sleeping in her bed, living a life that had already ended without me noticing. The week before that night, I had picked up her car from the shop and noticed a second phone charger in the center console. Same brand as mine. Same length. But hers was already plugged in. I didn't say anything. Not because I trusted her, because I didn't want to look stupid. Deep down, I already knew. And knowing is different from proving. That night, I was invited to my best friend's place, Eric. He and I had history going back to when skipping school meant hiding in his dad's boat shed and burning through gas station cigars. We'd grown up, sure, but he was the one person I never doubted. His wife, Claire, was quieter. Reserved. She watched people the way an architect watches a building sway in the wind. Like she was looking for cracks before they could collapse. My wife said she had a late meeting. Big client. Last-minute request. I'll be late. Don't wait up. I didn't even flinch. I said, sure. Good luck. She barely looked up from her phone. That phone she never let out of her hand. At Eric's, we drank bourbon older than our friendships and laughed about the things we swore we'd never become but did anyway. Corporate pawns with receding hairlines and subscription boxes for beard oil. Claire sat in the corner with her glass of red wine, watching. Always watching. Then, when Eric stepped out to take a call, she turned to me and said something so precise, so calculated, it cut right through my skin. She's not at work, you know? No emotion, no warning, just that. I stared at her and she stared right back. And in that still moment, I felt like someone had emptied a bag of ice straight into my chest. Claire leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was discussing the weather, not shattering my life. I saw her car, parked outside that place on Holloway. Twice this week. Same black Audi. Same license plate. Then, after a beat, same man. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. I already knew. My jaw tightened, but I didn't say anything. The bourbon burned on the way down, or maybe it was something else. Claire stood up and walked toward the kitchen, but halfway there, she paused. Then she turned around and added, casually, too casually, you might want to ask your best friend where he was last Thursday. Around 9. The glass slipped in my hand and shattered on the floor. Eric came rushing back, asking what happened, laughing nervously, trying to smooth over the tension he felt but didn't understand. I told him it was nothing. Just a slip. He smiled too much. Said we should grab dinner next week. Said to bring her along. And that's when the room tilted sideways. Because if Claire was right, and I felt it in my bones that she was, then it wasn't just a betrayal. It was a betrayal wrapped in a betrayal. A knife twisted by the one person I trusted most. I left without saying goodbye. And 2 days later, Claire came to my house. Alone. She stood at my door with eyes that looked too calm for someone holding dynamite, and before I could speak, she dropped the words like lead on my doorstep. After her husband slept with my wife, my best friend's wife came to me with a proposal I never saw coming. That's where it all starts. And trust me, this story doesn't go where you think it will. She walked into my house like she'd done it 100 times before, but this time there was no pretense. No polite smiles. No careful distance. Claire moved like a woman who had already decided something, and whatever it wasn't going to wait for me to catch up. I didn't ask her to sit. She did anyway. On the couch where I'd watched my marriage quietly dissolve for the past year, cushion by cushion, word by word. She crossed her legs, looked around like she was measuring the damage, and finally said it. I know what they did. It wasn't a theory. It wasn't a suspicion. It was a verdict. I stood by the window, hands in my pockets, the air too heavy to breathe. You're sure? I followed them, she said, casually, like she was telling me she'd picked up groceries. 3 weeks ago. I had a feeling. She parks 2 blocks away from that condo building on Sycamore. Rides the elevator up to 17. He gets there 10 minutes later. They don't leave for hours. I couldn't feel my hands anymore. My body didn't know what to do with the truth. She doesn't even try to hide it, Claire added, and her voice cracked for the first time. Just a little. He used to lie better. Now he doesn't bother. I sat down across from her, suddenly exhausted, like I'd run a marathon barefoot. Why are you telling me this now? That's when she looked at me, really looked at me, with eyes that were both broken and focused, like a shattered lens that still knew exactly where to aim. Because I'm done watching them pretend they're good people. And I think you were too. There was silence. The kind of silence that hangs in a room after a gun goes off even when no one's pulled a trigger. Then she said the thing that twisted my stomach into a knot I still haven't managed to untie. I want to burn this whole thing down, Claire whispered. But carefully. With style. With patience. And with proof. That's when she pulled out a flash drive. Set it on my coffee table like it was a poker chip. It's all on there. Times. Photos. Audio. My throat went dry. I stared at it like it might explode. You bugged them. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. No. I bugged him. Months ago. For something else. But then this happened. Thought I deleted it all. Guess I missed a few files. That's when I realized how far gone we both were. How deep this went. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was war. And Claire, this quiet, sharp-edged woman, had already picked a side. I picked up the drive, felt its weight. Small, cold. But suddenly, it felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. I want in, I said. She didn't smile. She just nodded once, slowly. Good. And just like that, the game began. But we had no idea how far it would go. What we'd uncover. Who else was tangled in this? And we were about to find out. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the living room with the lights off, holding that flash drive like it was some cursed artifact. My laptop was open in front of me. The screen's glow the only thing lighting the room, and I kept hovering my finger over the touchpad, ready to open it. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because the moment I clicked, everything would change. It would become real. The next morning I skipped work. Called in sick and didn't even bother faking a cough. Claire texted me once, just a single word. Ready? I wasn't. But I said yes anyway. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. Neutral ground. She was wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. And I realized quickly it wasn't because of the sun. It was to hide the war behind her eyes. I didn't comment. She didn't explain. She slid into the booth and set her phone on the table like a weapon. I brought backups, she said. Cloud and physical. You expecting them to find out? I asked. No. I'm just used to liars deleting things. We didn't talk much after that. Just pulled up the files. The first audio clip was barely 40 seconds long. Her voice, my wife's voice, laughing. His voice, Eric, telling her to stop because someone might hear them. Then her whisper, "That's the fun part, isn't it?" Claire didn't flinch. She just pressed play on the next one. This time it was longer. Whispered conversations. Plans. Lies. A schedule so neatly organized it felt like a business meeting. They had days, locations, even fake calendar invites in their phones. Then there was a video. Claire warned me. Told me I didn't need to watch it. But I did. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to see what betrayal looked like. It wasn't some wild, chaotic scene. No drama. No passion. It was routine. Familiar. Comfortable. Like they'd done this a dozen times before and stopped pretending it was wrong. That's what hit the hardest, not the fact that it happened, but the ease of it. The confidence. When the video ended, Claire finally looked up from her cup of untouched coffee. "We can't go to them with this," she said. "I wasn't planning on it," I answered. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You're not angry enough." "I'm not showing it." "That's different." She seemed to consider that. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Names. Places. Dates. This is everything I've got. So far." I took it, still numb, and tried to think. But my mind kept returning to one thing. Why? Why him? Why her? Why us? And then Claire said something that cracked it all open. "They don't think we'll do anything," she said. "Because we're not loud. We're not reckless. They chose each other because they think we're weak." That hit me harder than anything else I'd seen or heard. Because it was true. They didn't just cheat. They calculated. They chose the two people least likely to retaliate. We sat in silence for a long time after that. Then Claire leaned in and said, "I have an idea." And that's when the story started spiraling into something neither of us could have predicted. Because her idea wasn't about revenge. It was about power. Claire's idea wasn't the kind of thing you say out loud unless you've already crossed a line inside yourself. She laid it out in pieces, slow and deliberate, like a puzzle only she knew how to solve. "We're not going to confront them," she said. "Not yet. That gives them control. It gives them a moment to lie, to rewrite, to flip the narrative. And it makes us look bitter. Emotional." I raised an eyebrow. "So what do we do instead? Wait around and play passive-aggressive chess?" She shook her head. "No. We flip the script. We make them nervous. We make them feel like something's wrong. But we don't tell them what. Not at first." Claire wanted to dismantle them the way they dismantled us, quietly, methodically, without ceremony. We'd let the silence eat at them, the confusion wear them down, the paranoia grow like mold behind their perfect smiles. "You and I are going to be the best actors they've ever seen," she said. "We're going to smile, laugh, compliment them at dinner. But just enough to make them wonder. And then we start moving pieces behind their backs." We agreed on a timeline. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of pretending everything was fine. 2 weeks of observing every twitch, every lie, every misplaced word. We would document everything, but we would say nothing. That same day I invited Eric to lunch. He looked surprised, maybe even guilty, but he smiled like nothing had changed. That smile, I used to know it inside out. It had meant trust. Now it just looked like camouflage. We sat at a busy spot downtown, packed with noise and strangers, and I acted like I hadn't seen a video of him whispering promises to my wife in a stranger's bed. I told him I missed our hangouts, that I felt like we were growing apart. He actually looked relieved, like I'd saved him from having to be the one to address it. He bought both our meals, said it was on him for being a bad friend lately. I almost laughed right there at the table. Over the next few days, Claire and I went full surgical. I bought a burner phone and started saving messages, forwarding voicemails, screen recording everything from her device when she left it unattended. Claire did the same, but she went further. She started slipping comments into conversations with her husband, casual, perfectly placed suggestions to test his reactions. "Babe, remember Sycamore Street? We used to love that little cafe over there," she said one night just to see his face twist for half a second. Or when she casually mentioned someone from your work called earlier. I forgot their name. Eric's hand would freeze halfway through dinner every time. They didn't know yet, but they could feel it, like animals sensing a storm in the air. And then, just when things started tipping into perfect paranoia, Claire dropped a bomb I didn't see coming. "We should invite them over," she said. I blinked. "To your house?" "No. Yours. This Friday. Dinner. The 4 of us." "That's insane." She smiled. "Exactly. It'll be unforgettable." I stared at her, trying to decide if she'd completely lost it or if she was 2 steps ahead of everyone, including me. Then I nodded. "All right. Let's feed the snakes." Friday was coming fast, and it was going to be the kind of night none of us would ever forget. Friday arrived with a kind of pressure that felt stitched into the air. Every hour ticked past like it was dragging something behind it. I spent most of the day preparing. Cleaning a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. Setting a dinner table that would soon host a performance worthy of awards. Maybe even arrests. I knew I wasn't the same man who used to organize game nights and grill chicken for people who smiled at me while betraying me behind closed doors. That version of me was dead. This one was watching everything from behind a mask, steady and silent. Claire arrived early. She brought wine and a coldness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. She wore something understated but sharp. Not seductive. Strategic. Every piece of her was calculated. She looked around my living room and said, "You kept the knife block close to the table. Smart." I chuckled darkly. "I'm only serving lasagna, but good to know I have backup." She sat, opened her phone, and showed me the last messages from her husband. He texted her 15 minutes ago, "Leaving now. Excited to see you." I read it 3 times, trying to feel the words as something other than poison. It was like watching someone else's life implode through glass. Then the doorbell rang, and everything we'd built, the silence, the surveillance, the creeping suspicion, collided into that one moment. They walked in like a Hallmark couple. Matching smiles, eyes gleaming like they hadn't just spent the last 3 months destroying 2 marriages. My wife kissed my cheek like nothing was off, like she hadn't been calling someone else baby in another bed. Eric gave me a firm handshake, overly firm, the kind that says I need this to feel real. Claire greeted them with a brightness so fake it could have lit a stage. "You two look amazing," she said. "We were just talking about how much we missed this." I poured wine. We made small talk. For 20 minutes, it almost felt real. But under the table, Claire and I were exchanging glances like snipers lining up a shot. The shift came during dinner. It was subtle. A sideways comment from Claire, "You've been working late a lot, haven't you?" Her voice was smooth, her fork perfectly still. Eric hesitated. "Yeah. You know how it is. Deadlines." She nodded, taking a slow sip of wine. "Sure. What's on the 17th floor, by the way?" He blinked. "What? You said you were at a client's place on Sycamore." I looked it up. That building's residential, but only the penthouse has private access. I'm guessing that's the 17th. The silence that followed could have swallowed the room whole. My wife jumped in too fast, too defensive. "Claire, what are you implying?" Claire turned to her, still smiling. "Nothing. Just curious why my husband's work meetings happen in luxury apartments with do not disturb signs." I watched the cracks form right in front of me. My wife went pale. Eric looked like he'd just been handed a test in a language he didn't speak. Then I added my piece. "I actually drove by there last week," I said. "Weird coincidence. Saw your car parked out front. Didn't know you were consulting for real estate now." My wife stood up. "I think we should go." Eric didn't move. His eyes were locked on Claire's, and for the first time since this all started, I saw fear. Not guilt. Fear. Like he knew something was coming and had no clue how big it was. Claire didn't blink. "Sit. We're not finished." She pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. One tap. The audio file started playing. It was them clearer than I remembered. The laughter. The schedule. The planning. My wife's hand shot out to grab the phone, but Claire was faster. She slid it away, calm as ever. "We made backups." Eric finally spoke, voice low. "What do you want?" Claire leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Not money. Not apologies. I want you to feel what it's like to be exposed. I want the illusion to end." I stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the quiet street, letting the silence settle like smoke after an explosion. When I turned back, the night had changed. The pretending was over. And what came next wasn't going to be about healing. It was going to be about ruin. They left without saying goodbye. She stormed out first, practically knocking over the wine glasses on her way to the door. Eric followed close behind, tossing a look over his shoulder like he wanted to say something, maybe beg, maybe threaten, but nothing came out. Just silence and the sound of 2 people finally realizing the walls were closing in. As soon as the door shut behind them, I felt the weight lift off my chest, only to be replaced by something heavier. Not pain. Not rage. Something colder. Purpose. Claire stood in the middle of my living room, arms crossed, staring at the spot where they'd been sitting like she was trying to memorize it. "They're going to panic," she said. "Good," I replied. "Let them." That night, we set the second phase in motion. We started small, precise. Claire sent a carefully worded anonymous email to Eric's firm. Nothing too obvious, just a subtle suggestion that he'd been using company time and resources for personal engagements. No proof attached, just enough to get him watched. I did the same to my wife's employer. Dropped a tip to HR about potential conflicts of interest. After all, she had billed hours to a consulting client who didn't seem to exist in any corporate database. We didn't lie. We didn't fabricate. We just nudged. The next few days, the tension became visible. My wife was jumpy, on her phone constantly, snapping at me for things she used to ignore. I played dumb, asked if everything was all right at work. She said it was fine. Her smile was hollow. Her hands trembled when she poured her coffee. Claire called me that night. "He asked if I've been talking to anyone about us. Did you deny it?" "Of course not." I said I had been talking, but only to my therapist. I let him stew on that. We both laughed, but the humor was short-lived, because the next morning things escalated fast. I woke up to a knock, not at the door, on the window. Claire, her eyes wide. pale. She was holding her phone, and her voice was shaking when she said, "You need to see this." She showed me a message, sent from a number she didn't recognize. "Stop, or we go nuclear too." Attached was a photo, not of us, not of anything explicit, just a picture of us from that dinner night. Me and Claire on my front porch, talking close, smiling at something in her hand, taken from across the street. Someone had been watching. I felt the ground shift under my feet. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was war. "We have a problem," I said. Claire nodded slowly. "No, they do." She grabbed my shoulder, grounding me, eyes locked. "This is when they start to panic. And when they panic, they get sloppy." She was right, because later that day, I got a call from Eric. "Hey," he said, voice strained. "Can we talk?" I played it cool. "Sure. What's up?" "Just need to clear the air. A lot's been misunderstood. Things are being twisted." "Meet you in 30? I asked. He hesitated. Yeah, that works." I hung up. Claire looked at me, already piecing it together. "They're trying to split us up," she said. "Divide and isolate. Classic move. But we won't bite," I told her. "We're not like them." Claire paused, then said something that made the hairs on my neck stand up. "No, we're smarter." And we were. But the thing about cornered liars? They always strike before they crumbled. I met Eric in the back corner of a local pub. The kind of place with dim lighting, sticky menus, and music just loud enough to muffle secrets. He was already seated, 2 beers sweating on the table. I hadn't even taken a sip before he started talking. "Listen, man," he said, leaning forward like we were old war buddies planning an escape. "This whole situation is out of control. I don't know what Claire told you, but it's gotten twisted." I looked at him carefully. His face was tight, nervous. He kept glancing over my shoulder like he was afraid someone might be listening. I let him stew in the silence for a beat, then said, "You lied to me. Slept with my wife. And now you want to talk about twisted?" He dropped his gaze, exhaled hard. "It wasn't supposed to happen. It was stupid. I didn't mean for it to go that far. It just got messy." Messy. That word stuck in my head like a splinter. Messy is dropping a drink, not orchestrating months of betrayal. "She told me she loved me," he said suddenly. "I didn't ask for that." There it was. The crack, the subtle shift in blame. He wanted me to know he hadn't meant for it to happen, but also wanted me to feel sorry for him because she fell harder. The guilt shuffle. "She says a lot of things," I replied. "You ever wonder how many others she's said them to?" He looked up sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means maybe you weren't her only secret." I could see it hit him. A subtle twitch in the jaw, the tightening of his grip on the glass. Doubt, Claire's favorite weapon, had just been delivered, gift-wrapped. Before he could gather himself, I dropped a grenade. She showed me the messages, the recordings, everything. "You think she came to me out of pain?" "No. She came to me with a plan." His face went pale. "You're bluffing." I leaned in, slow, calm. "Am I?" The silence between us stretched until it snapped. Eric stood up, barely managing to keep his voice level. "You're messing with the wrong person." I smirked. "So are you." He left without finishing his drink. Left behind a man who wasn't scared anymore. When I got home, Claire was already there, sitting on my porch, legs crossed, like a queen overseeing a battlefield. "How'd it go?" she asked. I tossed her Eric's beer from the pub. She caught it without flinching. "He's rattled. Slipping." She nodded. "Good. Because your wife, she called my sister today." I blinked. "Your sister?" "Yeah." Said she was worried about me, that I've been unstable, that she's afraid I might do something to myself. There it was. Not defense. Not denial. Character assassination. "They're trying to discredit us before the real fallout," Claire said, her voice hardening. "Trying to make us look crazy before we bring the truth into daylight." I sat beside her, something solid forming in my chest. Then we go faster. She turned to me. You ready for the next step? I thought we just took it. No, she said. Now we take everything. And with that, she pulled out the second flash drive. The one she hadn't shown me before. What's on that? I asked. Her eyes never left mine. Insurance. And the kind of evidence that'll make them wish they'd just confessed. The second flash drive was heavier than the first. Not physically, just in the way Claire handed it to me. Like she was transferring something radioactive. I didn't ask what was on it. Not right away. I took it into my office, locked the door behind me, and opened it on a separate laptop. Claire waited outside, arms folded, pacing like someone who'd placed a bet she couldn't take back. Inside the drive were folders. Dated. Labeled. March_recording_01.wave sycamore_surveillance.mp4 work emails_redacted.pdf and one folder that wasn't labeled at all. Just a blank gray icon. That was the one I opened first. Inside were screenshots. A string of messages between my wife and someone who wasn't Eric. The contact name was hidden, but the content wasn't. Explicit. Manipulative. Conversations that made it clear Eric wasn't the first. Or the only. These weren't love notes. These were cold. Transactional. One of them even included her asking someone to delete everything once this is done. I read them all one by one, feeling the illusion peel back like dead skin. I wasn't just dealing with betrayal. I was dealing with a strategist. My wife had layered lies so deeply even Eric didn't know he was just one chapter in a very long story. Claire had uncovered a trail of manipulation that ran far deeper than either of us had guessed. I opened the surveillance video next. It was silent footage, time-stamped. Eric arriving at the Sycamore condo. Entering alone. 10 minutes later, my wife arrives. They stay for over 2 hours. But at one point, after she enters the building, someone else leaves. Not Eric. Not her. Someone unknown. Male. Early 30s. Baseball cap pulled low. That man appears in 2 other videos. Claire hadn't just caught their affair. She'd uncovered a pattern. When I opened the email file, it all crystallized. There were receipts, real ones. Plane tickets. Hotel bookings. Uber logs that didn't match any of the lies I'd been told. And at the center of it all, her. Coordinating, scheduling, adapting. Like betrayal was her second language. I came out of the office slow. Claire turned to face me, silent. She was playing him too, I said. Claire nodded. I thought so. She's careful. Too careful. Eric was never the endgame. He was a pawn. Then what was the endgame? Claire paused, then said something I still can't erase from my head. Leverage. What kind of leverage? She inhaled deeply. Eric's firm is trying to lock in a government contract. A big one. If he gets it, he goes public. Becomes the face of the deal. If anything about an affair leaks, anything scandalous, he loses everything. So she seduced him. Made him trust her. And now she's holding it all like a loaded gun. I sank onto the couch, the truth burning through me like acid. Why? Because, Claire said, sitting beside me, your wife doesn't love anyone. She just collects people who can give her what she wants. And when they can't, she discards them. I sat there for a while, staring at nothing. Letting it sink in. Finally, I turned to her. So what do we do now? Claire smiled. But it wasn't warmth. It was precision. We give her what she wants. And then we take it all away. She laid out the plan. Piece by piece. We weren't just going to expose them. We were going to flip the power. She was going to send the footage anonymously, not to HR, not to friends, but to Eric's legal counsel and the board overseeing the contract. Quiet. Clean. Just enough for suspicion to bloom. And me? I had something better. The messages. The pattern. The other men. I would feed those into her world, just slow enough to fracture her web before it collapsed all at once. Not publicly. Not yet. So she'd start to sweat. And when she came looking for the leak, she'd find nothing but smoke. Claire looked at me one last time that night and said they thought they were the storm. But we are. She left without another word. And as I sat there in the dark, surrounded by a war I never asked for, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted to outplay her. It started with a text. A short, frantic message from my wife 3 days after Claire's anonymous drop landed at Eric's firm. Did you say something to anyone? I stared at it for a minute, letting the paranoia bleed through the screen before replying. About what? Silence. Then, I don't know. People are acting weird at work. I feel like I'm being watched. She was being watched. We made sure of that. By then, the anonymous tip had already caused a ripple inside Eric's world. Claire confirmed through a quiet contact that his legal department had opened a discreet internal inquiry into a potential vulnerability in his conduct. That's how they worded it, vulnerability. The kind of word that burns slower than scandal but digs deeper. Like termites in a foundation. Eric tried to control it, of course. He met with the board. Pitched his charm like always. But now his smile had teeth marks in it. Claire told me he hadn't been sleeping. Started working from home. Started doubting everything. And as for my wife, I let the cracks widen in her world one piece at a time. I sent an anonymous email to her boss, not from her firm's server, but through a third-party client, routed through a VPN, with a time-stamped screenshot of one of the messages she'd sent to another man. Not Eric. Someone else. Someone higher up. I watched her mood deteriorate in real time. She was snappish, distracted, obsessively checking her phone. At one point, I caught her pacing the kitchen, whispering into a burner phone she must have bought recently. Claire and I met once more in a quiet park at dusk. No digital trail. We didn't trust anything electronic anymore. She handed me a printed envelope. This is the last piece, she said. Inside were printed emails, some from my wife, some from Eric, highlighted in yellow. Nothing directly romantic, but enough to suggest collusion. Enough to hint at manipulation, misuse of trust, even minor coercion. Why give me this now? I asked. Because tomorrow, Claire said, eyes sharp, you're going to dinner with her. I blinked. What? She'll ask. She'll try to test you. Reassure herself. You're going to give her exactly what she wants, comfort. And then you're going to leave this envelope in your coat pocket. Slightly visible. Just enough for her to find it. I stared at the envelope. You want her to think I'm turning her in? No. I want her to know you could. That night, just like she predicted, my wife came into the bedroom with a soft voice and a fake smile. Maybe we should go out tomorrow. Reconnect. Just the two of us. I nodded like I was grateful. I'd like that. The next evening, we sat across from each other in a restaurant filled with low light and artificial calm. She smiled, touched my hand, told me she missed us. I looked into her eyes and thought about every lie she'd told, every name she'd whispered, every time she gaslit me into doubting what I saw with my own eyes. And I smiled right back. I excused myself halfway through dessert, left my coat on the chair. The envelope slipped just slightly out of the inner pocket, the tip of it exposed. When I came back, she was pale, stiff. She didn't mention it. Neither did I. But the next morning, she was gone. Just gone. No note, no call, no message. Just her side of the closet stripped bare and her car missing from the driveway. Claire texted me 2 hours later. She ran. Eric's in meltdown mode. It worked. I stared out the window, feeling something unfamiliar stir inside me. Not victory. Not relief. Freedom. The storm we became had finally swept them away. But it wasn't over yet. Because the final move wasn't about destruction. It was about truth. The final chapter wasn't an explosion. It was a reckoning. Quiet. Controlled. Almost surgical. She was gone, yes, but not far. Claire's sources tracked her to a condo 2 cities over, under a different name, renting short-term under a fake account. She hadn't run to escape punishment. She ran to reposition. That's who she was. A woman who didn't disappear when exposed. She evolved. Eric wasn't as graceful. Claire told me he showed up at her house 2 nights after the dinner, drunk, angry, accusing her of destroying everything. She didn't let him in, just watched him unravel from the safety of her porch, arms crossed, calm. He kept saying, "We could have fixed it, Claire." You didn't have to go nuclear, she told me later, sipping tea like it was just another story. I didn't respond. I let the silence do the talking. His firm removed him from the contract 3 days later. Quiet internal memo. No scandal. Just reassignment. In corporate terms, he'd been reduced. Still employed. Still breathing. But his ambitions, those slick, carefully laid plans, were dead. As for her, she reached out to me. It was almost laughable. A burner email masked through some anonymous mailer. Subject line, "Can we talk?" No apology. No shame. Just a cold attempt to recalculate the equation. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to Claire. She didn't laugh. She just said, typical. What came next wasn't rage or triumph. It was release. I moved out of the house a week later. Sold off half the furniture. Gave away the rest. I didn't keep the bed, the sofa, or even the silverware. Everything had fingerprints I couldn't scrub out. Claire helped. We didn't say much that day, but there was a moment, mid-move, sweaty and silent, where she stopped, looked at me, and said, "We did what we had to." And I believed her. The last step was the paperwork. No lawyers. No drawn-out war. She signed what needed to be signed electronically from whatever hideout she'd slithered into. The silence from her end was the loudest thing she ever gave me. Claire and I don't talk as much now. We check in an occasional message, a random link to something ridiculous or clever. But there's no need to stay close. We weren't built from love. We were forged in fire. And once the fire dies, you don't sit in the ashes. You walk away. So what did I learn? That betrayal doesn't always come with dramatic reveals or loud arguments. Sometimes it comes in whispers, in dinner invites, in the way someone smiles while planning your undoing. I learned that silence is a weapon. That subtlety can cut deeper than shouting. That revenge isn't always fire, it's ice. Slow. Relentless. Surgical. But more than anything, I learned this: when someone shows you they're playing a game, play better. So, to anyone reading this who's standing at the edge, wondering if they're crazy, if the pieces in their gut are lying to them, they're not. You're not. And you don't need a war to win. Sometimes you just need the truth. And the courage to use it.